Earlier this year, Games Workshop introduced Female Adeptus Custodes, which caused the internet to accuse them of getting woke. Today, we're going to find out if all that trouble and all that uproar caused them to go broke. Well, let's see here. We got record revenue, record profit, and Kevin Roundtree, the CEO, has to say, after a record year, we will continue to focus on the things in our control. We have a very clear strategy which remains unchanged, a detailed operational plan for the year ahead, and a great team to deliver it. I wish to thank all of our staff, customers, trade accounts, and broader stakeholders for their ongoing support. Exciting times. Well, I guess the answer to that is no. And if we take a look at their mid-year report, it's even a little bit more salt in the wound. For the first half of the year, Games Workshop's revenue was £235 million, which if you do the math is a little bit less than half of their total revenue. So therefore, they actually made more money in Christmas and 2024 during the time when this Adeptus Custodes thing was going on than during the launch window of Warhammer 40k 10th edition. Now that doesn't mean that Games Workshop doesn't have a few things to say on the topic of DEI. Well, at least the D and the I part. They don't mention the E word, but more about that in a minute. Most important, though, is that I am not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice. I just like to take a look at the Games Workshop financial reports each year because it's one of the few companies, I think right now it's the only gaming company, that we get to see some details about what's going on the inside. And every now and then there are some interesting little bits about the game that gamers would find interesting. But for the most part, these are just financial documents where Games Workshop's trying to basically be like, we're awesome and you want to invest in us. Like this little section right here basically just says we make awesome miniatures, awesome games. People pay us lots of money for those games, and every now and then we go ahead and license those properties to make a little bit more money. If you're a fan of Warhammer, the reality is this document probably doesn't have a whole lot of interesting stuff that you don't already know. It's basically like, we make our own miniatures, we sell our own miniatures in our own stores, as well as selling them in third-party retailers. Things that gamers would want to know, like for example, does one product or one product line sell more than the other? We don't really get a lot of detailed information like that too often in these documents. However, there's one note here that comes up every so often. It's a way of Games Workshop kind of couching their performance to kind of tamper things down a little bit. Let's take a look. Here we are on page 4 of this year's report. It is still worth noting that historically the launch year of a new Warhammer 40,000 edition is normally the financial high point until the next edition of Warhammer 40,000. I'm stating the facts. Warhammer 40,000 is still our best-selling range of products. We have an ambitious plan for the next period. Time will tell whether it was good enough. This is kind of Kevin Roundtree's way of saying that, well, in case next year isn't as good, this is why. There wasn't a new Warhammer 40k edition. But so far for the last 5 years, Games Workshop just keeps making more and more money, so we'll see what happens. We will see. But I should also note there, it does say that the Warhammer 40,000 is their best-selling range of products, so at the very least, we know that 40k outperforms Age of Sigmar. Let's take a little bit of a look into the whole Amazon television thing, because there's actually a few more details in this report that can be confirmed compared to last year. If you're hoping to find confirmation whether Henry Cavill threatened to quit over Female Adeptus Custodes, that's also not in this document. But we have learned that Amazon does have the option to license the rights to Warhammer Fantasy. Now, it's not clear whether that's Old World or Age of Sigmar in the event that the 40k TV show does go through and go well. Now, the important note is that Games Workshop and Amazon here have to basically come to a creative understanding on the show by the end of this year. Otherwise, if they don't, the agreement will not proceed, and presumably we may never see a 40k TV show, or maybe someone else will pick it up. On the entertainment notes here, we should also mention that in just actually a few weeks, we're going to see the launch finally of Space Marine 2. So Games Workshop likes to highlight that down here at the bottom. We're delighted that the new games launching in 24-25 include the highly anticipated video game Space Marine 2. Then let's take a look at one little note for Warhammer Plus, because it's fun to keep track of how many subscribers that gets. Last year, Games Workshop had 136,000 subscribers for Warhammer Plus, and this year it jumped to 176,000. One interesting piece of news that's not in this document that I'd be curious to know why it isn't there is late last year, Warhammer Plus was banned in Canada for some reason. I don't know. I've heard a couple different references on the internet what it is. And I think it's been restored, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But you would think they would mention a big issue like, hey, our new streaming service got banned in a major country, but they don't. Anyway, shall we talk about social responsibility? Like a lot of companies, Games Workshop does not formally use the phrase DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They call it social responsibility to make it sound a little bit nicer. And they pretty much give a fairly generic statement here, but there's a few interesting notes. It reads, we are committed to ethical sourcing and staff well-being, diversity, and inclusion. We will be collecting and reporting internally the ethnicity of our staff, and we will track trends. Committed to diversity, we will continue to performance, manage, and recruit for the personnel qualities needed to do a particular job, as well as the necessary skills. I will continue to do my best to ensure this is the case and that we are fair and free from any bias and/or prejudice. So the first note there is the lack of the word equity, which is something here in the United States we talk about. I'm not sure if that's a big UK thing or the fact that a fairly large and successful company doesn't want to have allusions to Marxism and other communist, socialist type things. Maybe, maybe not. They also noticed they used the word ethnicity, which here in the United States, when we talk about diversity, or when people who are supportive of DEI talk about diversity, it's basically always just about race and whether someone is white or not. So I'm not sure if Games Workshop is tiptoeing around that or what, but it does sound kind of like they factor in the ethnicity of the employees when they go ahead and try to hire them. Even though several years back, if you dig through this, they kind of said, what exactly did they say? Let me look up something quickly. This right here is the annual report from 2022 by Games Workshop, and I knew there was something interesting in here as to why they don't use the term race. It says, we are reviewing the business consequences of collecting and reporting on race and ethnicity to date, and we have never collected that data from our staff. We are not sure if it's the right thing to do or have the legal authority in some countries to request it without failing some other legal requirement. It's a complex problem to solve, and we don't discriminate. But on the back of the whole topic of Adeptus Custodes and all that stuff, do these boycotts seem to threaten Games Workshop at all? And so far, the answer is no. They do have a risk section where they kind of talk about what are the risks to their business, and so far, customer boycotts over social issues are not in the list. Let's take a quick look at what they are, though. They're all fairly generic things, like IP protection, in case someone tries to steal their intellectual property and pirate their stuff, I guess. I wonder if 3D printing goes under here. I don't think so, because they don't mention 3D printing miniatures ever in these documents, but, I've talked about that in the past. Cybersecurity, data and systems, obviously getting hacked would be a bad thing. Global distribution and supply disruption, i.e. countries go to lockdown for some sort of pandemic or war or something like that. They've talked in the past about Russia versus Ukraine and how that has affected their sales. And finally, loss of key manufacturing and warehousing facilities in case, a bunch of product gets blown up by a meteor, fire, earthquake, weather disaster, violent riots. That's kind of popular right now in the UK apparently. So nothing about customer boycotts in here. And Games Workshop being a publicly traded company, I think if they felt that a rebellion by their customer base was a serious problem, they may want to actually mention it in this document as a potential risk. Because if they are missing something important, let's say people 3D printing tiny space marines, I've mentioned that before, if that was a really serious risk to their business and they didn't tell their investors about it, there's probably legal ramifications for them as a company, if not legal ramifications for them as individuals in the C-suite. But let me talk about two more things related to this whole Adeptus Custodes female space marine thing going on. There are two interesting little notes that came up during this discussion that maybe we can talk a little bit about based on other news reports since then. One of the things was that the reason they're going with female custodes versus, say, the Sisters of Battle, which I think most Warhammer 40k people would love to see Adeptus Sororitas in the TV show, is that they were trying to stay away from anything that looks super religious as much as possible. There is one interesting little news article pertaining to that Star Wars show that has got canceled. If I mention it, I'm going to get a bunch of YouTube things about it. I don't want those people watching this video because this video is not for them. Let me show you one interesting little news story about that. Here we have a quote from the showrunner as reported by That Park Place. It is unusual to point to pieces of pop culture that have representations of extreme spirituality. The concept of God is such a heavy concept. The concept of religion is such a really oppressive one, especially for people like myself and many, many others. So what we have there is at least a piece of evidence that there are people in the movie production industry that have such a negative view of religion, they may want to completely avoid even fake religions like that of the Church of the Emperor and Warhammer 40,000 that are completely made up for a science fiction franchise. So possibly, just possibly, the reason why we got a female Adeptus Custodes is indeed because whoever's working on the show wanted to avoid anything that looks like a traditional religion. Now, also related to this topic, I want to mention one person's name that appears at the end of the financial report. So here at the end of the document, we have some officers from the company signing their names. Of course, Kevin Roundtree's there. And the one I have highlighted, the CFO, is Rachel Tongu. If that name sounds familiar, it's because back when the whole female Adeptus Custodes thing kind of hit the internet, some news reports reported that she had announced her retirement because of the disaster that was this Adeptus Custodes thing. However, that is simply not true. And to prove that, I'm going to jump back over to the mid-year report that came out, I believe, like December 2023. Also, after 27 years with the group and 9 years on the board, Rachel Tongu has informed the board that she does not propose to offer herself for re-election as Chief Financial Officer at the next AGM meeting in September 2024. Rachel will continue in her role, working as an integral part of my team to ensure a smooth transfer of responsibilities to her successor. Rachel's amazing, and she'll be missed enormously. So there you go. You can see that she announced her retirement several months before that particular product release, so it's highly unlikely that she chose to retire because the disaster, well, the internet disaster that was Adeptus Custodes. With that, that's about all I got for you guys today. So I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and I want to thank you all for watching. If you have any comments on this wonderfully explosive, divisive topic, feel free to post them down below. And if you're curious as to whether I'm diving into any other tabletop game products, if they supposedly gone woke or not, yes I am. And the next one's going to get particularly explosive. It's a little bit more interesting than this one is. I'll see you guys next time.